Good vibrations.
And welcome to episode 178. This is very much following on from the episode 2 shows ago with Christopher James of A Warrior Calls, where we were talking about practical solutions under the common law system. And I really wanted to put a UK perspective on this and have another conversation about it. So on the show today, I've got John Smith of commonlawcourt.com. Welcome on, John.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on.
I'm guessing we're speaking to you in Scotland, based on your accent?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's start with a brief bit about your background and how you came to be involved in this subject, if you would, just very briefly.
Long story. I left school and went in to study electrical and electronic engineering. I went to college, qualified, and when I left, I had to wait a few months to obtain an offshore survival certificate before going to work offshore in the oil rigs. I decided, rather than doing nothing, to look for a part-time job for a few months and ended up working in a casino. I loved it that much. I actually stayed for 21 years. I progressed through the ranks and ended up as a company director and also a general manager. Held the highest ranking certificate within the industry. Had a very successful career. Unfortunately, I ended up going to work for a couple of private club with a couple of directors who had no gaming background. Found out within a year of working there, they were criminals, they were breaking laws, and I had to leave to protect my license. Now, having done so, the gaming board, the regulatory body at the time, as a general manager, needed to know why I was leaving, and everything came out. Now, the long and short of it was that they were breaching the law. The gaming board at the time were negligent, had been for 8 years, allowing various things to happen, and they wanted to cover it up. Now, I had no evidence. All the evidence was in the casino, and it's been proven time and time again that I was correct. In fact, the club has been closed. It took them 8 years to do so after I left. However, I went to the court system to claim the remainder of my contract that was outstanding. And on taking on the directors, the gaming board refused to back me up because the damage it would do to the UK industry and the tax revenue, they didn't want the public knowing. I was hung out to dry and the directors turned on me. So basically, when I went in to use the system worked against me as well. And having done that, I ended up losing everything. But the long and short, when I'd actually went to the court system, I seen how corrupt it was. For the first time in my life, I'd been involved in court. I had a look at it, couldn't believe what was happening. So then decided, having lost everything and ended up bankrupt, that this needed to be sorted out. So I started speaking to various people about what we're going to do, and then came up with a concept after about 10 years of the common law court. So since then it's commenced. The first court was convened on the 11th of June 2017, and since there it's huge. We're actually, believe it or not, we have people in 141 different countries using this process. We're taking on court judges, governments, and they're all using this system just now. We're having huge success. But it's given the current situation just now, it's gaining pace rapidly. But as I says, apart from a freak accident when I ended up in court, I would have never known any of this at all.
Yeah, it's fascinating, the individual circumstances that people go through that bring them to this kind of area. And it always involves them being involved in injustice of some kind or other. And that leads them to seek remedy through different means, different paths. How closely linked is the common law system with the Magna Carta? And why is there disagreement among many in this field as to whether the Magna Carta still applies? And also there seems to be arguments going on as to whether Article 61 specifically can still be evoked. You know, different people active in common law seem to differ on these points. What's your take on all that?
First of all, in relation to, we're using the term common law. While I have no personal objection to that, being a Scotsman, it doesn't go down well, which is an English term. And believe it or not, we have colleagues in France, in the continent, are not keen on the term because, again, it's English. But if we look at what we're dealing with, it's not effectively common law, and it's categorised as a standalone system. It's not. It says this system we use can also be called natural law, universal law, law of the land, the Creator's law, God's law, depending on your religious background. So any of these titles all fit. So if you had been on the continent, we have people abroad, like the common law court, they're not keen on the words common law, but they may refer to it as natural law, universal law. It's still the same principles apply. Effectively, it boils down to cause no harm, no loss, or no injury to anyone, ensure that you don't breach the peace, and ensure that in your contractual dealings you're honourable. Now that is applicable under any heading: common law, natural law, universal law, God's law, the Creator's law. It doesn't matter. This is why this is applicable in each and every country throughout the world, and even if you have a religious background as well. So it applies under these names. It's okay to use common law as well, because it literally is. It all follows the same principles. So that obviously gets rid of the terminology. It's just down to basic principles for sovereign individuals. Now, when we look at documents throughout history, there has been various documents created over centuries in different countries, and people use these as a guiding light to deal with issues in relation to the protection of people, how we deal with governments and things like that. The long and the short of it is, there was something created, obviously in 1215, it was a Magna Carta. Now, what we have to remember here, the Magna Carta was not created by the people. Magna Carta was created initially because the barons drafted it and drew it up. Now, the barons, as far as I'm aware, didn't live in the villages with the peasants, so to speak, the people. They actually had their own castles, their own property, their own lands, but they weren't happy because King John at the time was basically taxing them to the hilt, and they had to do something. They realised they couldn't take the king on themselves, so they needed to have the people behind them. So they actually created a document, the Magna Carta, but with that, they had to have the people on side. So they created various things in Magna Carta for the benefit of the people. And we still use them to this day. And it also has been used to create founding documents throughout the world. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. And the document had been created. Now, it was signed reluctantly by King John at the time in 1215. Now, that document is still valid to this day, and it can never be changed. It stands in perpetuity. So therefore, it still applies. But what happened is there was amendments to it later on, and there was different versions that came out. But they made these alterations through Acts of Parliament statutes. They added to it. Now, because the government have developed their system over the years and centuries, they do not want the original Magna Carta in place. So what they've actually done is they've referred to Magna Carta and says that it no longer exists because statute legislation has changed it. That's a blatant lie, because the original Magna Carta stands and will stand forever. It cannot be altered or changed. Now, what they've done is they have changed Magna Carta, but that's the later versions, and they changed it with statute legislation. Now, if you go into court and you try to refer to Magna Carta, the judges are trained to ignore it completely, and they just say it's been changed and it doesn't exist now. Now, it does exist, it stands there, it can never be changed or altered, and it's still applicable. Now, in relation to the original Magna Carta, there was Article 61, which gives the people the right to rebel if the Crown doesn't fulfil its obligation to the people. Now, what had happened is the Crown, certainly in the 70s, and with obviously the Commonwealth and went into the common market, Ted Heath at the time, there was obviously a crime committed against the people. So what did happen, Article 61 has stated that if we're going to put the Crown on notice in government, that up to 25 barons, a minimum of 25 barons, have to sign up and lodge their objection with the Crown. Now, they did that invoking in 2001. We had the 25 barons. But when they done that, it says they invoked that put the paperwork into the Crown, and the Queen responded at the last minute. However, what had happened is many of the people had also wanted to stand with them, so they signed an oath to stand with the Barons. So many people have signed up the oath and sent off to the Barons. However, after invoking Article 61, the Barons have done nothing at all. And I mean literally nothing. And what happens is that people that stand under Article 61 refer to that in courts all throughout the country and the UK, and the judges ignore it every time. As far as I'm aware, it's never worked once. They deny it, and they just ignore it and carry on. So there is really little point in using it. Although it's valid, it's lawful, and they can be held accountable. The problem is the judges ignore it, and they are backed up by the state and the system, and they will never be held accountable for the crimes that they commit. So effectively, the judges and the courts, the judicial system they have, do whatever they want. It's not there for justice. It is a registered company, and it's run for profit.
What recourse would somebody have if a judge claims that the Magna Carta no longer stands and attempts to throw it out? Surely there must be some way in which you've got some comeback on that.
Well, basically, it says in a case, I didn't refer to Magna Carta simply because they won't accept it. Now, if you take this issue and you wish to have recourse, you're required to go through the various courts. You go to a judicial review as well. But the point is, what we found is that they will never allow you to go through the court system. They just block it. Now, we've actually went through helping various people. We've went up to including the Supreme Court, and they will always find some way to refuse accepting it unless you go through their system and you use a solicitor or a barrister within the system. This is to argue the point, they will not allow you a hearing. If you're a living man, they will not allow you a hearing because their courts are corporations and can only deal with business entities, which is effectively your legal title, your legal fiction. If you state you're a living man, they have no authority to deal with a living man, and the case will never be heard. If you then accept the position of the legal fiction and you employ a solicitor to go in and challenge it, that's fine because their rules apply and you have to abide by their rules. And the people representing you do not have your interest first and foremost. Their interests are to protect the Bar Association and the courts and the system, and then the people, and then you after all that. So basically, if you have a solicitor or a barrister, it's a complete waste of time because they work for the opposition, even though you're employing them, and their rules apply as well, which is why we set up the common law courts, because he says we have nothing to do with our system and rules.
Okay, so the key is not acknowledging that you are the legal fiction that's being created in your name, but to stand as a living man or woman and to consistently assert that status then.
Yes. We've actually achieved quite a few results in the short time that we've been using this. I actually got one of. I'm going to check the confirmation or confirm the information, but I can give your listeners just now one which is relevant to what's currently going on. We had a nurse who been working for a number of years in a hospital trust in England. She went to her job and she was told to wear a mask, which she refused to do so. So they immediately suspended her and sent her home. She came back after a couple of days off for her next shift, and she was told again she had to wear a mask. She refused to do so. So they then says, right, we're suspending you until the end of the month. You're required to come in for a meeting. So she had to go in for a meeting with them. She was on full pay. They went in for a meeting and she referred to the government position, the legislation, COVID, and discussed all these things and said she didn't want to comply. They had said, it doesn't matter about the government stance on this. We're a private trust and our rules state you have to wear this, the mask, and that's the end of it. Now, she refused to do so and said, right, we're suspending you for another month. Now, the first month she was actually on full pay, but when they suspended her for a second month, they said, you're now going to be on half pay. So there was a meeting arranged for the end of the following month, and she got together with them and she refused to wear the mask. And they says, right, well, that being the case, he says, we're going to have to investigate this matter. After the investigation, he said, we'll reach a decision and we will notify you the outcome. However, if you're not prepared to wear a mask, is the chances are we'll be looking at a dismissal issue. But because obviously will take us a month to investigate this, and they used the month of January up to the 31st to have their investigation, they says we will have a meeting with you on the 4th of February to discuss what we're going to do. However, during the month of January, you're not going to be on pay. You're unpaid. Now, the first month was November. She got full pay. The second month in December, she was given half pay. And in the month of January, she received no pay. Now, they weren't listening to the government's stance in relation to COVID and what was going on. For example, they changed their stance, confirming that it was downgraded. I think it was March last year, obviously the position of COVID. So they downgraded that as well, but they weren't having any of it, this trust. But the trust had used the legal title against the female. So the female had spoke to myself and said, look, I know we need to deal with this. Now, given their stance and the fact that they weren't even following the statutory legislation, there's no point in using that. So what we did is she gave consent to allow me to claim her legal title. So I claimed her legal title by submitting an application to the Common Law Court, and I actually used the process and obtained ownership of her legal title. So effectively, I have an ownership certificate for her legal title saying that I own it. I then wrote to the manager in charge and to the manager at the HR for the trust to confirm that they were unlawfully using my property, which was my legal title. He said the legal title ownership was confirmed through this registration or declaration with the Common Law Court, and I produced an ownership certificate which they were presented with. They were told that they couldn't use that, and they were told that I was aware that they've tried to take my property and attach it to a living woman who had confirmed her birth with the Common Law Court. Now, this woman had no legal title to attach to her. I owned a legal title they were using unlawfully, and they're not allowed to do that. In fact, the fact they're trying to do that, they're breaching their own legislation, which is a Slavery Act, by using a title and trying to get her to accept it. Now, we pointed out this and obviously what they were doing under common law, various crimes that they're committing, but predominantly it's slavery. So that was pointed out, and they were then informed that unless they rectify the situation, the two managers highlighted would be facing a claim for substantial damages in relation to the kidnapping issue and the use of my property, and they will be held personally liable for this claim. So I submitted that and gave them 7 days to respond. Now, for the last 4 days, I've actually been aware I was in London. I haven't been able to check my emails. Now, I'm aware that there was supposed to be a hearing on the 4th, so they were due to get back to me on around about the 5th or 6th. I haven't checked my emails, so I don't know if they've come back. But when I phoned the girl concerned on my way home yesterday, she informed me that they have not responded to her about the outcome, and there was no meeting on the 4th. I thought, right, which was very interesting, which she agreed. And she then says, however, I have received a letter. I said, well, what did the letter say? Was it about the 4th of the investigation? She says, no, I received a letter stating they're allowing me to come back to work and I can wear a mask. But it says they would like me to work the night shift, which she did give an option of changing departments or changing the night shift, going to night shift, but that was not acceptable. And they refused it point blank. Now they've actually written to her, they're trying to agree a date to return to work. She's going to come back full time. She will not have to wear a mask, and she is going on to the night shift. Now, that's a huge result. And I had said to her, well, that's fine, but have they reinstated the finance, your money you lost? She goes, no, there's no mention of that at all. I thought, fine, well, I'll come back. She says, and basically today, I'm going to look into it today to see if there was any response to my email address. Failing that, I'll be holding them personally liable and telling them that unless this female has her money reinstated within 24 hours, I'm taking a case against them for substantial damages. So I will deal with it. But the point I'm making to your listeners is now, she stood up, was threatened with the sack dismissal. She'd been working for years. They were going to dismiss her for gross misconduct. They refused point blank. This is to budge. They told her she had to wear a mask and she was suspended for 3 months. Now there's a complete backdown. They've invited her to return, and they're allowing her to return without wearing a mask. And that is by taking ownership of the fiction and showing them how it works. What they were doing was slavery. This female is a living woman, which we've confirmed. However, they were trying to take the title that the government attach it to her without her consent, and then prosecute her and sack her because she didn't follow rules. So she hadn't agreed to that. The title's not hers. He says, so I claimed ownership of it with her consent. So I claimed ownership and I confirmed that it's my title. I don't live in England. I don't live anywhere near her. I don't work for the hospital trust. They're using my property, which I have an ownership certificate for, which is established and it's stamped by the court, and it carries the authority of the people. They cannot challenge that. So therefore, what it meant that they were trying to enforce a living woman to apply or recognise statutory legislation, and they were trying to attach a legal title to her, a fictitious name, which she didn't want to accept. That's slavery, 100%, and they'd be prosecuted. And because we can now do that, they back down completely.
Thank you for breaking that down. It seems this subject area is a real minefield. There's a lot of cat and mouse game playing taking place. You've got to really know what you're doing to make anything stick and be able to use the right language and stuff. And it seems another problem is that the living man or woman, for them to assert themselves and for the common law system to have, or natural law of the land, whatever you want to call it, for it to have any practical value for an individual, it's got to be comprehended by all around them that this is the case as well. So, for instance, if a police officer or a traffic warden or a COVID marshal is not on the same page and they're reading from a control system crib sheet and they're trying to issue you with a fine or a summons or whatever, then they have no real knowledge of the fact that this system applies. Maybe those further up the hierarchy would have some understanding of the power that you're standing in, like Chief Constable of the Police, for instance. But the average rank and file foot soldier out there on the streets, you'd be just speaking a foreign language to them because their training has not armed them in how to deal with such a situation, right?
Yes, that's correct. There's many people, look, everyone has to earn a living. Unfortunately, says the people have just now, because of COVID, most of the population are on furlough, or the works have closed down on their premises if you're not essential. It says the people that are trying to enforce these regulations, whether it be police, COVID marshals and the like, they're actually paid and they have a job, which is unfair because the people obviously need to exist as well. However, the people that are actually dealing with this, many of them, the foot soldiers, as you say, are unaware of this. They have no understanding at all, or if they do, it's very basic. They do not understand, many of them, that there is a distinction between a legal fiction and a living man. Now, I had been, I was 40-ish, literally when I had a problem. In fact, it was late 30s, sorry, when I had a problem with my previous employers. I had left, and the first thing I did was go to a solicitor to rectify the damage done. I then went to the court, run out of money, ended up bankrupt, and it was only when I represented myself I found out that there was something wrong. The judge had literally says to me, and what the key words were, "I'm not interested." And I thought, you arrogant sod. Excuse my language. I thought, you arrogant sod. How can you do that? He said, no, I'm prepared to stand up and argue my rights. And again, I'm polite when I do so, but I'm not stupid. And if I can go into a situation like that, and it's daunting going into a court for the first time and never had anything to do with the judicial system, but to go in and confront a judge and stand there and try to argue with them, to turn around to someone and say, I'm not interested. Basically, I said I stood under common law and I was a living man. He says, I'm not interested. I thought, you can't do that. There's no justice here at all. And I says, why did he do that? He can't do that. And I looked at it, well, he can in his system because he's a registered corporation. It's all about corporations and contract law. It's not about living men and women. But people don't understand that. And then when I found out, I said, right, how do you deal with it? So we looked at that. But that's the way it is. They're using their system as corporations, corporate bodies, and they're using contract law. And unless people understand that, they're going to run into problems. He says the basic principle is they have a judicial system. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. I wouldn't want anyone to take my word. Basically, what we're saying is the police, the court system, parliament, government, everyone, they're all registered corporations. We went into a court the other day, it was down in Westminster in London, Westminster Magistrates Court. They're a registered company. So therefore, as a registered company, there's been Supreme Court rulings as well, stating that as a corporation, they have no authority over a living man, which means they cannot prosecute you. So if you have identified yourself as a living man and you have evidence to confirm that, they cannot prosecute you. Their rules do not apply unless you consent to them. Now, this is a very hard lesson to learn because people don't understand, but the evidence is there, and everything can be checked out. And it's not checked out through obviously what we do. It's checked out on government websites, on corporations, on company check legislation sites. They do all this. The information is there if they look into it. There are people that will help with this, but once you grasp the concept that we don't have a justice system, we have a corporation that says it's a justice system, but they're only there for money. We don't have a police force. The police force we have, literally, is a corporation run for profit. How many times, if you call for the police to attend a house because there's a disturbance or there's something wrong or someone broken into your house, you'd be lucky if you get the police out at all. If you turn around and tell them that there's about half a dozen people standing outside breaching COVID legislation, you'd be hit with about a dozen police officers within 5-10 minutes. They'll all be around there. And again, the big thing about COVID legislation, they're saying that you're not complying. The first thing they do is fine you. It's all about money.
Yeah.
So they're taking fine. They're not there to police. They're not there to act as a constable. The police, as it stands just now, we don't have the equivalent of an old constable. When the police were set up, effectively, it says, yeah, we had constables, which is the Bobby on the beat. They would go out, prevent breach of the peace. They would go out, speak to the public. You would see them on the streets. Now, they're not police constables, they're police officers. Now, there's a difference because the officers work for the corporation. So the police, you can go to the various police forces, or the police force within your area, run a check on them, and you'll find out that they're company. So effectively, what they're doing is they're employing people, police officers, and they're putting them out to deal with statute legislation. So they're dictating what the people can and cannot do, but they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to. They don't have the power to. Effectively, policing, when it was set up, in this country, we're supposed to police by consent. That means that the public have to consent to this and agree with them. If you do not consent, the police have no authority, especially more so now that they're a registered company. Not only that, is if you look at the parliament, the government, is when the government's installed, they tell you, the classic one is in America, it says when obviously they stand there and they give their address to the nation, they actually confirm, as they do in the UK, that they govern by consent. Again, if you withdraw your consent, their rules are not applicable. You have a right to withdraw your consent. You have a right as an individual, a born sovereign, it says to stand up and say no. When you are born, the legislation they had, and we have various ones, it says which is supposed to protect the people. Now, we had one, luckily enough, in Scotland. Now, again, it was great, not because it's any different from the rest, but it does actually show one slight difference. It was based on the battles between Scotland and England in the time it was Edward, I can't know if it was first or second, but he's known as Edward Longshanks. Now, what did happen? You know him, you see him in the Braveheart film, but they eventually beat the Scots, and then they were going to take all the land and assets from Scotland. Similar to England, the Lords and that in Scotland, they says, we're not having this. But instead of creating something like Magna Carta, they actually created a document which was called the Declaration of Arbroath, and they wrote to the Pope. But the Pope was the supreme leader at the time in the world. But they basically says, look, we're effectively law-abiding citizens. We're born here and we're born sovereign. Everyone in Scotland is born sovereign. We will fight to the death to protect our land. However, the English are guilty of crimes against the Scots, and they then turned around and covered various crimes that they're committing. And he says, never will we, as long as 100 stand together, he says, will we succumb to the English rule. That's a general gist. But it says they recognise the church and they stand loyal to the church, and they're happy to do that. Now, the Pope at the time had a choice. He could have either turned round and dismissed this letter and sided with English, in which case it would have been genocide. The Scots would have been wiped off the earth and English would have took over. Or he can, as the Scots were standing with the church and wished to obviously respect the authority of the church, they were doing nothing wrong and they were quite happy to stand with the church. However, they wanted to protect the people. They highlighted that the people are born sovereign and therefore they don't have to succumb to the English rule. They have a right as sovereign people not to do that. So the Pope accepted that. So the English were told to back off, and they did. But what that did was create a document. Now, that document is great because it says, as long as 100 people stand together, you have the right and the authority to challenge everyone, meaning governments, crowns, parliaments, everyone, as long as you have 100, and you can confirm that. Now, that was accepted by the church, it was accepted by the UK government, it was accepted by the crown, and it's been done everywhere. Now, recently, in last few years, because of Brexit, Nicola Sturgeon had used this very argument. The people in Scotland are born sovereign. We will never succumb to English rule. You cannot create legislation and just dictate to the Scots, you will conform to this or comply with it. Because we're sovereign, we have rights. Now, there was a discussion in Parliament. It went on for a few days, but the long and short of it was for the UK Parliament, again, had to confirm, as recently within the last 2 years, they had to confirm that the Scots are born sovereign. Now, if you're born sovereign, you don't comply with the legislation, which is ludicrous, because Nicola Sturgeon is now saying to the Scots people, well, we have COVID legislation, so you'll now comply with it. Well, excuse my French, but sod off. If the Scots are born sovereign, we don't have to comply with legislation because it doesn't affect living men. So she uses it to suit herself with the UK.
She wants
Parliament.
it both ways.
Yeah, yes, she does. Now, the point being is, I don't know. The other point that they're conveniently forgetting, and I'd like to highlight to your listeners, everyone all over the world is born sovereign. When you're born, you're not attached to anyone. You're born, you're sovereign. As soon as you're born, what happens is someone will grab you. Now, by grabbing you, I'm literally saying, look, if you are in a community somewhere in the world, you're part of a religion, it is immediately you're taken in by that, or you live in a country and they have a society set up, like the UK, you have a society here, but you're taken immediately into the society and you get the position of a citizen. And when you become a citizen of the society within the UK, you then have privileges. But the point is, for the privileges, you have to get a license, you have to accept their system, you have to accept the rules, you have to comply with the rules, and you've got to pay for the privilege. But the point is, the things that you're allowed to do, you get that anyway, because it's an inherent right for your birth. But everyone claims you. Now, obviously, that's why you're roped into the system, and as a child, you don't know that. So effectively, you're being bound into slavery at birth. The government have just hid the process. They've camouflaged it with the use of the fiction, and they've bound people in straight away, and the public don't know that. And that's the problem. He says, if the people, you're not saying that the system they have is great. I like it. I think it's great. It's been developed for hundreds of years. We should be proud of that. He says, so I would say, yes, brilliant. We have a problem, not here, but, well, not only here, should I say, worldwide. You have a system that's been developed. Unfortunately, it doesn't work because the people within the system running it are criminals. They're causing harm, loss, and injury to the people. And because they stand together, no one is holding them accountable. So therefore, they're not held accountable. The system won't change. If you take the individuals out of the system that are causing the problems and that they are held accountable, once you remove them, if you put people in to do the job correctly, we have a wonderful system. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So therefore, there has to be sort of weights and measures. You have to turn round and you have to have something in process that will hold them accountable to the people. So therefore, the people have a right to set up and convene their own common law courts and use their own system. So they have a right. It's not to replace it. It's to use, to address a lawful remedy which they've been deprived of. And then when things are put right and the individual's removed, you can then use the system. This exists to protect people. Now, hopefully, it shouldn't be used if the system works correctly. But as soon as there's errors and the people suffer, the people have a right to use this process that we've set up.
So, applying this to current circumstances, would you say that the common law system offers the only realistic way out from this communist New World Order master plan that the so-called elites have planned for us? And how realistic is it that the corrupt governments of the world, as individual men and women, not hiding behind that government entity, but as men and women in their own right, can be held to account for things like fraud, treason, genocide, crimes against humanity that they've committed against their people?
We have, to be quite honest, it does. It's the only way to rectify this problem. We have, and I spent a number of years as well, and I've been involved with loads of people, not only here, and even in the UK, internationally, we speak to people. There's no way to beat the system within the system because they've developed it and rigged it, and it was quite clever what they've done, but effectively they're committing crimes against the people. But now that we know what's going on, there is no way within the system to obviously get the better of them. You may get the odd result, which we do, like we've just got one. But again, we were using the common law approach to deal with an issue regarding this nurse just now. Now, in a similar issue, about 6 weeks ago, we actually got back a family of 5 children who'd been removed for 7 months, and they're now back with their parents using the common law process. Now, this, I personally, in my opinion, I believe that this is the only way to rectify the ongoing problems, not only in this country, but throughout the world. If you use this process, what you're actually doing is you're addressing the harm, loss and injury that's caused to the people, and to remedy it, you're giving the power back to the people, and you're giving them a lawful process to comply with, and that will then hold the system accountable and the criminals that are committing the crimes against the people. So we have that. You can develop it further, he said, because we're looking at enforcement as well, and we will have in the near future common law court constables, CLC constables, so they'll be patrolling throughout the UK as well. We were looking at other things just now. Now we were looking at issues that range from things like healthcare. It's ludicrous. It says if you're suffering just now during the COVID, they're closing the hospitals. They even close doctor surgeries. So if you have something, you're waiting for an operation, you can't get in. And because the hospitals are not admitting people, a lot of the public are actually dying before they can get into a hospital for treatment. So the people are actually dying because they cannot get into the hospitals. It's the same with doctors. They can't get to see the doctors. Some people, because of the pressure under, it's creating mental issues. Some people are suicidal. It says some people, because of lockdown, are deprived of money. They can't feed themselves, heat themselves. All these things shouldn't be happening, but they are because of the way the government's working. He says you're here to protect the people, to work with the people. They're not doing that. This system will correct it and will hold them all accountable. But it's done when the people realise that they have this power. Now, you do not have to take to the streets to protest. He said, but basically, you're not taking them on, you're not confrontational. All the people have to do is literally submit a declaration confirming that they exist as a living man or woman. It costs nothing. Within the website, and it's only when the world is doing it, it's just for everywhere. We've got 141 countries and thousands of people doing this. He said, but if you were to turn up and say, right, there's no record of you existing. Now, I don't know, again, we've got thousands of people. I don't know if you personally have, or your listeners have actually submitted a declaration for their birth. But if I were to ask you or your listeners just now, I need you to confirm who you are. Can you confirm that, please? They would say, yes, I'm a male, I'm a living man, this is or a living woman. I say, yes, can you confirm it? Would you have any evidence? They would say, yes. They'll take out a driving licence. They'll take out a bank card. They will take out a national insurance card. They will take out a letter with a postal address on it and a title. They'll take out credit card. Loads of things they'll take out, all these documents. That is not the living man or the living woman. Every document they have relates to the legal fiction, the legal title that the government have, that the government created. That's not the living man or woman. So effectively, unless you have stood up and confirmed somewhere that you are a living man, you don't exist. Now, when I went into court the first time, I said to the judge, I'm a living man. He says, well, I couldn't care less. I thought, how can you do that? And then I thought about it. I was standing as one individual. You're taking on a system that's been developed for hundreds of years. You're taking on the establishment, the court system and government and police and everything. And you stand as one individual and say, I'm a living man. Well, I would agree. So what? It doesn't make any difference. The difference being, when we went back to court a few months later, we was helping someone else. It wasn't my case, but basically we stood there with him. Now, this individual had submitted a declaration to Common Law Court when it was set up. So he confirmed, he said, by making a public declaration that he's a living man, he confirmed when he was born and put the details in. Effectively, like the state's equivalent of a birth certificate. But he's put this information in and signed it off. Now, what he then done is obtained a birth certificate. So you don't need a hard copy because you're given a reference number. But what he did is he took this and he then put it into the court as a production. So it was added to the case file. So he stood up in court and says, I'm a living man. You do not have jurisdiction over me. And this court doesn't. At which point the judge says, yes, I do. He said, look, I'm not listening to all this rubbish against free men on the land, crap. And again, that's another no-no. He said, because they've got that all wrong. But he says, I'm not listening. To which the individual replied, well, wait a minute, hold on. You cannot just ignore this. I'm confirming I'm a living man. And he says, look, I'm moving on. I'm not dealing with this. I'm not listening to it. He says, well, look at the exhibits you have in front of you. I've confirmed that. So he pointed to his exhibit number 1 or something. So the judge had looked up at the paperwork. He says, what you have in front of you is a court document. It's a court deed. It's stamped by the Common Law Court and it confirms that I am a living man. Therefore, as a lawful document carrying the authority with the people, you cannot ignore that. I am a living man. You have no authority. The judge looked at it, studied it, paused for a while, and then says, right, okay, I will accept the fact that you're a living man, but it doesn't change the case. I'm going to continue. Now, what he was actually doing is saying, right, okay, I can see you're a living man, but I'm not dealing with you. And then what he didn't say is, I'm going to deal with the legal fiction. What he says is, okay, you're a living man. I have no authority over you. I'm going to continue. But what we did is we then stopped them and says, well, hold on a minute before you proceed. As you have no authority over a living man, you cannot continue. You stated you're doing so, so therefore you must be trying to continue against illegal fiction. However, if you look at Exhibit 2, what you'll find is a copy of my ownership papers for the legal title. That is also a court document and it carries with it the authority of the people. And because I own the fictitious title, the fictitious name, without my consent, you cannot proceed. I'm removing my consent. I own the title. You have no authority to deal with it. He says, I'm not dealing with this. This is rubbish. I'm not listening to it. I'm adjourning for 2 months. And he fixed the date, banged his hammer, got up and walked out of court because he couldn't deal with it. We took away all control. Now, the system exists. We're proving it time and time again. I can show you there's loads of cases we don't have the time to go into, but we have governments throughout the world dealing with these things and nobody can do it. We have paperwork we can take in. If you think of any level within the corporate system, the statutory system, if we look at courts, we've been up to every level of court within the UK in different countries and we're right up to the Supreme Court. Nobody will deal with us. We went directly to the Prime Minister, the Cabinet Ministers, prosecuted. We've prosecuted 7 judges in 3 different countries. We've issued warrants, summonses to courts. We've convened courts. We've achieved huge results. Now, it's numerous throughout here. But in doing so, we've submitted these documents to everyone. Now, we've put in over 1,000 of these documents. Not one has ever been challenged because they can't. If they try to challenge it, what they're actually doing is they're challenging the authority of the people. That's why nobody will challenge it. Now, the point is, because we have these lawful documents confirming our position, he says we can expand on that if the more people sign up, he says, by stating they stand together as living men. Without making a public declaration, they don't exist. They can stand outside and say, I'm a living man or woman, but without making a public declaration, there's no record of that. So if they say, if I go outside and a neighbour says, I'm a living man, I'll say, fine, have you declared that in the common law court? They're not. Now, I can see them there physically and I can touch them, but I know that they're living because I can see them. Nobody else in the world I can prove that to. I'm telling them and trying to have a conversation with them. I could go onto your show and I could be standing speaking to my neighbour just now. I can see him and I can touch him, shake his hand and say, look, he's a living man. But there's no evidence of that anywhere. I can't prove it. If he had submitted his birth declaration, I can go on and speak to your listeners and yourself and say, look, I'm speaking to my neighbour here. I'm shaking his hand. He's a living man. I can confirm that because he submitted his declaration. It's on the common law court site. Therefore, there's a lawful record of his position, and we can refer to that. He does exist, and there's a record of him. Without that, there's no record. And the government obviously can do whatever they want, and that's how it works. But as I says, all it takes is for the people to stand together. You don't have to go out. You don't have to protest. By making the declaration, you're confirming your stance. The more and more people do that, the more power you have. You can change everything. In relation to things, we've spoken about the ongoing problems worldwide. There's a simple solution in every country. Every government that exists within the world, they exist under the statutory system, and they are all registered companies. They're corporations, and it boils down to contract law. Now, if we were to have an election this year, say the people said, look, we want an election now and call for it, so we're going to have an election in the UK in 2 months' time. What the people have a right to do is turn around and say, right, we're going to have politicians in, we're going to convene a parliament, we're going to vote. However, we're setting the rules that any individual that stands for parliament and represents the people may only do so as a living man or a living woman. Now, if you do that, that means that as a living man or living woman, they will go into parliament and they will be held personally liable. They will not go in as a corporation, registered as a corporation, or registered as a company employee. They will not go in and do that, which means that they're held accountable, and they cannot hide behind the cover of a corporation, because effectively it's slavery. So if the people had said you can stand as a politician and an MP, but you're only allowed to do so as a living man or woman, that corrects everything straight away. It takes away their power.
Do you think the so-called elites, the architects of this COVID narrative, fear the day when enough people come to these comprehensions and start to stand in their power and apply this system? Do you think they secretly fear that happening?
Yes, without a doubt. Now, I'm not here. I'm not going to turn around and tell people this is obviously about what's going on and trying to lecture them. Everyone has their own opinion. There is a lot of people, myself included, until I learned about this, are unaware of what's going on. The people need to understand and look at this. Now, the people, so-called people, the 1% that have the control, they know what's going on. They know the tide is turning. He says, but if you were to look into it deeper, you can look at things like vaccinations. You can look at Agenda 21 and things. It's all there for you. And effectively, people are dying off. Now, I'm not turning around and saying to people, look, they're trying to kill us off and that. Well, effectively, they are. But he said, look, forget that. Literally, people are dying. There are problems just now. Something like, I watched something at Christmas. Again, I get very little spare time. I found something really amusing, and I couldn't believe it. It showed a television advert. Now, at Christmas time, you always get adverts on about helping out for charity. And it's normally an African country because there's drought or famine, which there happens. Now, it's the way it happens. So there's drought, famine, there's a shortage of water, their eyesight's going, things like that. Now, these things should not happen anywhere in the world. And again, there's appeals put out for funding. So I happened to look up. I was walking out the room or something and just looked up, and there was somebody, it was a gentleman, I would have put my, for what I remember, probably sort of late 30s, mid 30s, 40. It was a gentleman, and he seemed to be in a kitchen and a small bedsit. And he literally had a sink to his left, and he turned round literally, and behind him was shelves and cupboards. So he turned round to the cupboard and went up, and he pulled out, I presume, maybe a tin of soup or something. And then they started speaking. They said, this is so-and-so. He is unable to go out to work. He has this bedsit. He's struggling to feed himself. He can't pay his bills. He says he's very little money. He lives off of soup. He says he's got nothing else. He's got bread. And they started to see that. And he said, if they're doing that, I looked at it. I thought, hold on a minute. That's the UK. I'm looking at it. And he said, and they said, there's no money. We need help. He said, people like so-and-so are struggling day to day to feed themselves. They cannot heat themselves. They have no food. They have no job. And they're doing this. And then they says, please donate to help these people. And I looked, and then it came up. It was a Red Cross. I thought, you having a laugh? We're sitting here watching adverts at Christmas time from the Red Cross putting up here because people cannot live and support themselves in the UK. And we're supposed to be a civilized country, one of the biggest economies in the world. And our people are sitting here. It says they cannot feed themselves, cannot heat themselves, they cannot keep a roof over their head. And God forbid, the guy had children. He was there on his own. And that's what he said, he was on his own. If you have a family, a young family, and they have children, and the children are not being fed. Now, again, there are people, this is that know what's going on. There is not a lot of celebrities stand up and take on the government and speak out. This is very few. There should be more and more people do it. However, there are people that do it. As I noticed recently, Van Morrison had taken out a few songs in relation to COVID and lockdown, and he managed to get Chris Rea to sing one of them. Great for them, brilliant. They're doing it, but they're few. It's the same as Marcus Rashford. He says what he went through as a child. I enjoy football. Regardless of who you support, he had a difficult upbringing and struggled to feed himself, or for his mother to feed himself. So he went without food. We have the country just now whereby children are not being able to get food. The parents are going without to try and give the children food, and this is happening. And you get these politicians who have not had their wages reduced. They're still in employment. They get all their expenses. They're not on furlough pay. They get what they want, and they're refusing to feed the children. It's disgusting that we're in a country and people are living like this just now. He says, God forbid if this continues for a while, which they're hoping to do, it's just getting worse and worse. He said, there has to be something done and the people need to stand up. There needs to be more people speaking out. And again, if you use the system that's available with common law, you'll be able to do that. But as I says, the privileged 1% that you mentioned just now, they know what's happening. And I think because they know what's happening, this is what's happened with these vaccinations and various other things. Now, things are hidden through media. The fact that you have this show is great. He said, but the point being is through media, it's controlled by effectively 6 families. You get their narrative. Whatever they want you to know, that's it. Whether it's the truth or not, it doesn't matter. People need to look behind the stories that's presented and find out what's actually going on. And when you see that, you can find out and understand how it's going. These vaccinations wouldn't touch on the bar's bowl. He says there's many doctors. He says they're prominent in their own fields in healthcare. They're standing up and saying, no, it's all wrong. These vaccinations have not been tested properly. He says, and yet they're trying to put them into you or inject people with them. It's ridiculous. They contain things like aluminium, mercury, and things like that, and various other things. Look, I'm not a medical expert, but he says these people are prominent physicians. They're turning around and say, look, these things are out, and it's not good for you. Now, the point is, they're taking all these things which are not great, and they're actually injecting it into you. And you're saying, yes, I'll have some of that, and they're queuing up to form a queue for it. He says, until it's proven, why would someone take a vaccination just because a doctor tells them to? He says, unless it's proven to be safe, why would you do that? We have the water supply that we have just now. I remember someone saying to me years ago, he said, well, the water supply just now, they have testing purification results that they must meet before we're allowed to drink water. And within the purification numbers, they are only allowed a certain level of aluminium as it goes in. Now, it says when you do this, certain things, it's something ridiculous. It's like 2% or something. If you exceed 2% of aluminium in the water, you're not allowed to drink it. It's not safe. And yet, when they got these injections, instead of having 2%, for the injections of vaccinations, it goes up to like 10%. And it's aluminium. Now, if you cannot drink water with 2% in it because it's a danger to you, they're actually taking something like 8, 9, 10% or whatever. I don't know the figures, so can't quote me, but it's something ridiculous. So the content of aluminium going into these vaccinations is way, way above what's safe for drinking, but they're actually putting into a dose, a vaccination, and then putting into your arm and injecting and saying, now you'll be fine. No, I don't think so. If you can't drink it at 2%, you're not going to inject it at 10%. Now, again, the figures I don't quote is correct, but this is sort of things that's happening. Now, I don't mind if we require a vaccination, we can take one. It's fine. But the point is, you have to prove that it's safe. They cannot prove it's safe because it's not been tested. It's not been isolated as a virus. If you do not do that, you cannot treat it. And this is what all these experts are saying. The UK Parliament have also downgraded this to say it's not. Obviously, this is a pandemic. They've turned around and says no. He says it's funny. I think if we can adopt a cynical approach, we live in a really good country. We're proud of our country. He says, which is nice to hear. He says every year we have a problem with flu. Every year at Christmas, everyone gets their injections. Everyone flu injection, the jab. He says it's brilliant. We have problems every year. People die as well. This year, I'm actually glad to announce that we don't have any flu problems this year. It's disappeared.
That's right.
So I think the lockdown is brilliant. It's cured the flu.
Yeah. And pneumonia and so many other things.
Yeah. But it's obviously the narrative that the state are giving you. People have to sit and ask these questions. Well, that's fine. We have a problem every year with flu. Where is it? It's gone.
Yeah,
No,
it's branded.
It's COVID. Yeah. So they need to think about it. But yes, to answer your question, the 1% do know. They know what's happening, and yes, they are scared. We've went into courts at various times. We actually, believe it or not, struggle to get into one of their courts because they're trying to prosecute people. So all we do is we put in the paperwork through the common law court as our defence, and we go to obviously challenge their position straight away. And in doing so, they will not give us a hearing because of the paperwork. We're dealing with an issue just now. It's been passed a magistrate and 3 different judges, and they won't give us a hearing. We have a guy who's kicked out of his house. We're still fighting, and we're taking on the police and the courts. They've had to, obviously, they were giving us a jury trial, and we've had 4 different dates for it, and he's still not in court. And they won't allow him into court because we will win. It's about the point that they just won't allow us in. They know what's coming, they see it's coming, but they're obviously trying various things. And this comes into things like Agenda 21, obviously the vaccination, the lockdown scenario. This is happening all over the world. And not only that, they are causing harm. Look at the children in the schools. Look at the fact we're not feeding people. The elderly are being isolated. They're being targeted as well. It says people are obviously have problems through mental issues because of what's going on. It says it's a wonder we're all not obviously lost the plot as to what's going on. It affects everyone, regardless of who you are. It affects everyone what they're currently doing. And again, remember, what they're doing is all done under the banner of a corporation. They're not a government. Here's one for your listeners. If you think you have a system just now it works, well, it doesn't work, but the system is great. Right, how do we deal with it? Well, we'd like to have politicians to go in and run a government and to represent the people. Right, okay, do they do what the people want? No, they don't. Right, who do they work for? Well, they don't work for the people, they work for a corporation. Right, okay, well, we'll sort that, we'll deal with it. We have an issue just now, so what we'll do is we'll go and talk to a politician. Or we will watch the news, or we'll see a politician on TV. You show me one politician that will actually stand up and answer a question directly. Doesn't happen.
Right. They're
They
trained
don't.
not to, trained to avoid it.
Yes, they're trained to give the narrative from the government. That is corporate speak. That's what you want. They're not there to represent the people. If you vote them in and you put them in, they work for you. So if you ask a question, they have to answer you. They don't. They work for the government. They work for the corporation. Well, if that's the case and they don't work for you, they don't answer to you, why are they there? Get rid of them. This is why this system has to change. If they were living men and women, they would answer to you. They would not be working for a corporation. That would change it. Now, the sooner the people realise this and stand together, the easier it is to become. Now, we have people just now, they won't take us on, they won't challenge us. We've had huge results in different countries. As I said just now, recently we got back 5 children. The paperwork we have just now confirming our stance, we have 5 different police forces in England will accept this paperwork as proof of ID. But the guy was telling you we were trying to get a court case because an issue about his house. Now, we were 100% correct, but the police got involved and things got out of hand, and literally, he says, the police turned and they were aggressive, they were out of order. So what we did is we contacted the police and lodged a criminal report. We wanted to report a crime. So we left about a week and says, look, why have we not heard about this crime report that was lodged? The police says, look, hold on a minute, sorry. He says, we're dealing with this. We still have another 21 days, or equivalent to that. He says, when someone lodges a complaint, we have 28 days to reply. Now, they changed it because what we went in is gave a criminal report. You're reporting a crime. They changed it from a criminal report to a complaint. No, it's not a complaint. So we argued, he says it's not a complaint. You will accept it as a crime report. They weren't happy. So he says you're dealing with it. Eventually, they then conceded, right, okay, we'll accept it as a crime report. He says, however, we're not going to deal with it until you confirm who you are. They want joinder. And they say, we require a document, a written document with your name on it. We require your address on it, and we require a photographic ID. So what we did is we submitted we supplied them with the common law birth certificate, the ownership certificate of the fictitious name, and we supplied them with a photographic ID card, a CLC card. So we put in these 3 items to the police station. Now we were targeting 6 officers and saying that they were committing crime. So we wanted them prosecuted in their own system, and we put in these 3 documents to confirm our ID. They gave it back within a week, thanked us for producing it. It's now been accepted, and based on the common law documents, they're now going to investigate their own officers. So that's confirming that all these documents are lawful and it's been accepted, not in 1, but 5 different police forces. We've had prisoners for a minor discrepancy, and it's nothing to do with the guy, we're 100% right, but they kept him in the police cells for 3 days. He wouldn't give his name. He said he was a living man, he wouldn't give it. So they took him to the court, and he wouldn't give his name to the judge either, so they put him back to the prison. Well, not the prison, the police station. They kept him in the cells. After 72 hours, they can't hold him. So they had to apply for an extension. So they went on the Friday to a magistrate, and the magistrate issued an extension to keep him in longer. So one of the constables we had at the Common Law Court contacted us and said, look, we need to get this guy out. It's ridiculous. And I said, well, what's happened? So we've done it. They're right, do it this way. So what we did is we got a copy of this individual's birth certificate, his ownership papers for the legal fiction, and we gave him a copy of the declaration for the Common Law Court to confirm the standing of the people. So this individual, the constable for the Common Law Court, went to the police station and spoke through a sort of tannoy to get to someone and says, we're here with paperwork to serve you with paperwork from the Common Law Court. I'm a Common Law Court constable. Now, they'd never heard of that. So there was somebody came down, a police officer came down, and he said, well, who are you? So we showed him the ID badge for the constable to confirm who he was, photographic ID, and his number and everything. He explained who he was. He was dressed obviously in a uniform and had his T-shirt over the logo and everything. And then he says, right, we're here to inform you that you're detaining someone unlawfully. He says, it's came to our attention. You have no right to detain him. The legislation is not applicable. Here is documents I'm handing over. That's his birth certificate. It's a certificate of ownership to confirm he owns his legal fiction, and it's a copy of the declaration for the Common Law Court. can I have your name, please? At which point the police officer then bottled. He says, why? What for? And he says, you will be held personally liable if he's not released, and you will be held personally liable for damages. And he says, well, you're not getting my name. He says, you can have my number. So we took a number, and the constable said, well, hold on a minute. I've just given you my name, my photo, and everything. All I need is your name. He said, no, you're not getting it. Have my number. And he says, right, well, you'll also need to inform your chief constable that he will be personally liable as well. I'm going to leave you with the documents, and we're telling you now he has to be released within an hour or we're going to take action. So the constable went away home. It took him about 25 minutes, 30 minutes to get home. He'd been in 10 minutes and got a phone call. So he picked up the phone. His mate was on the phone, or this guy was on the phone. He knew. He turned around, and the guy says to him, what the hell have you just done? And thinking there was something wrong. He says, why? What's the problem? He says, the police have taken me from the cell immediately, given back me all my stuff, threw me out, told me to get lost, and they've dropped all the charges. He says, what the hell did you do? And they said, well, this is what we've done. But it shows that they were detaining him unlawfully. He shouldn't have been detained. There was no charge against him. And not only did they keep him out for 3 days, the courts, this is assisting in the process, were quite happy to detain him even longer. But as soon as they got this new one, we says enough's enough. We went into the police station. It was only one individual. We handed over the documentation and had to release him.
It seems the phrase personally liable strikes the fear of God into him.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So the system does work. But again, just now, I said, look, we're not, when you're working this, you're not obviously you're not joining a secret army or something. You're not going out and obviously protesting and rioting and things like that. There's no need for all that. And yes, while things in the past allowed us to do so through the likes of Article 61, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work because the courts are not held accountable. They will be held accountable through the common law court. So this is why we do it. And all it needs is more numbers. Now, we have something here that's working. It's not as if it doesn't work. Article 61 is valid. It's great and it should work. Unfortunately, the people that fail to comply with it, we have no authority over them. We can't hold them accountable, and the state refused to do so. Under common law, we can hold them accountable. We're not using the legislation. Now, we have success in various courts. And we just told you about the one with this individual who got out of the police cells. We've got back 5 children from social services. That never happens. The children were taken away for 7 months. And because of the paperwork, and because we threatened to sue them and hold them personally liable, he says they then had to hand them back, but they couldn't admit on day one, right, we're wrong here, have the children. They had to think about the rest of the children they've taken away. So they obviously then tried to come up with a reason. So for the last 2 months, they've been trying to engage with the parents, and they said, right, we'll allow the children home. All the children are at home now. The parents have them. But the point is, they should have never done it, but they're trying to cover up. But we're not stopping there because we're still going for damages because of what they've done to the family and the children. So we still do that. That's an ongoing issue, but the children are home. Now, the common law court achieved huge results. A final one to let you, obviously, get your listeners to think about. If you think that this doesn't work, and bearing in mind it's only been going about 3.5 years, we mentioned Magna Carta, so we'll go back to then. That was 1215. We could go back further, but just take it back to Magna Carta. We have a judicial system in this country. The judicial system is set up and created supposedly to protect the people. It's not. But it's set up, run, and controlled by the state, the authorities. So you had initially the lords, the barons, the king. You've got obviously the sheriffs they appointed. You've got the courts, the different courts. You've got civil, you've got criminal. All these things are done, but they fall under the control of the state. So that's the way it works. However, never have we in this country, or I believe possibly other countries, had 2 or more judicial systems operating at the same time. Never. Yet, for the first time ever in the UK, we now have a second system operating. The second system operates, issues its own judgments, convenes its own courts, issues its own summonses, has its own constables as well, So we set up all this. Now this is done, and not only it's done, but we actually have the existing state confirming that it's done. They confirm that we do all these things, and they basically turn around and say, although it operates and it exists, we have nothing to do with it. That's their stance. But the point is, they say that it exists. They know it exists. They can't do anything about it. But the point is, this is the first system that's been set up with no state involvement. It's run and it's operated by the people, and it's there to protect the people. It's not accountable to the state, and the state are aware of this. They don't like it. It's that this is what's happened. Now, nobody's ever done that before. But within the UK, you currently have 2 judicial systems. Now, that was created literally in a couple of years and we've established it. And the state know that. They can't do anything about it. If the common law court were not to operate correctly, they'd be closed down, simply because you'd be doing something that's criminally or unlawful. They cannot find fault with it. They cannot pick fault in it because it's run correctly. It's run lawfully and it's run by the people. So providing these courts and the system is run correctly, they cannot do anything about it. So you have a basis. You have a basis to take back power. You can do it constructively. You don't have to worry about them. Let them get on with their own system. Let them operate a system. If they wish to do so, fine, let them go on with it. The people have a choice to use either or. To protect themselves, they're better under common law. But it's not a matter of saying, right, you've got to do one or the other. Basically, you use common law to protect yourself. As long as you're being protected and nobody's committing harm, loss, or injury against you, you don't have to use it. But by recording your birth, you have the protection if you need it. You can then conduct your life on a daily basis, and you can interact with the state. You purchase goods. You use their currency, which is basically credit, it's fiat currency. You use things like that. When you purchase things in shops, you're paying tax. It doesn't matter. You conduct your life normally. But when someone targets you and commits harm, loss, or injury to you, you can use your position as a living man or woman and common law to protect yourself. That's the way it works.
Now,
Okay?
you mentioned earlier that the Magna Carta has never been overturned or superseded. It still stands. You would think that the control system that we have would want nothing more than to get rid of that. So how is it that they've not been able to negate it in any way?
They can't. It says basically it's not an act of parliament. It says basically it was a founding document. It can never change. This is obviously it's been agreed with the people. They can change. The only things they have authority over is statutory legislation. It's not statutory legislation. It says it's not an act of parliament. It's not a statute. It says all these things. It says that's the only control they have. They can never get rid of it. What they did is they immediately found out there was a problem, so they then created an updated version, and with that they amended it with statutes. So that therefore that gave them a protection then to start interfering with it. But they couldn't tamper with the first and the original one. It's the same with the Declaration of Arbroath. It's the same with the Declaration of Independence. All these are founding documents. They're not acts of parliament. This is our statutes, and that's the difference. This is when the government set up and they're trying to change anything, it has to be within their system. These documents are not. They were created out with it. Obviously, they're there to protect the people. They're founding documents. They can never be altered. They can never be changed. Obviously, it's not done through Parliament. That's what I'm saying. Stay away from Parliament and stay away from the legislation. Going back to what we said earlier on, we actually govern by consent. We govern by consent. Then the Parliament are supposed to represent the people, and they create laws. This is supposed laws. They only become law if the people consent. So if they put something through the COVID legislation and they're stating it's a law, it's not a law. We govern by consent. If you stand up and say, I don't accept that, it's not law. And that's a fact within their own system. So you just say, no, I don't consent to it, and that's it. That takes it away. I had an interesting talk the other day with people in England, and we went on about the situation regarding the police. And it's noticeable that we've had successes with businesses that want to stay open. They've actually registered business through the common law court as well, which they're allowed to do. Now, these businesses operate under common law and not under the statutory system. So we've taken on the police as well. But again, through COVID, the police have got involved and tried to cause problems and issue fines and threats. What nobody does is ask the police to confirm who they are. For example, uniformed police at all times have an obligation to confirm that they're constables. Now, they have a warrant card on them, and unless they're in the middle of a riot and they can't, it's not reasonable to ask them for it. If it's normal, they're sitting there or they're chatting to you or they're there, there's no issue. People have a right to turn around and say, look, before we proceed, can I see your warrant card? Now, they are required to produce it. This is on any reasonable request. They cannot turn around and say, no, they don't have it. It says they have to produce a warrant card. Now, the only time they won't produce it is if they're undercover and they're not in their plain clothes. If they're in uniform, they will produce a warrant card. If you can get them to produce that, what it does is changes the goalposts, because when they do that, it then shows that they are a constable, and it says constable. So they're appointed as a constable. Now, when they've shown it, you can thank them for it. So that's fine, I can see you're a constable. Now, as soon as you do that, you then say to them, fine, okay, thank you very much. Sorry, what would you like to see me about? Then they'll turn around and say, right, I need to see about COVID legislation. They can't do that. 2 reasons is if you're a constable, you're only there to protect the peace, protect the people and prevent a breach of the peace. So that's it under common law. If they've identified as a constable, that's all they've got the authority to do. If they turn round and deal with statute legislation, they're no longer a constable, because that is only dealt with by an officer. So they then become an officer. So they're not allowed to do that. They're not a constable. So what the Police Act, I think the Police Act, I think I may be wrong, it may be 1996. It's a Police Act, and I'm pretty sure it's Section 80, I think. Either Section 60 or Section 80. It says there is one, that section deals with impersonating a constable. So effectively, if you have someone that identifies and says they're a constable, and they act out with the responsibilities, i.e. they act as an officer and they enforce legislation, that's a criminal offence for impersonating a constable. And if you do so and they were to be prosecuted, it would hold them liable for damages, but also they'd be facing a custodial sentence. So they could be jailed for it. Now, the thing is, if they do something like show the warrant card and they say, well, why would you like to see me? As soon as they mention legislation, you can say, well, hold on a minute. You've just identified yourself as a constable. He says, therefore, you cannot deal with the legislation. I don't consent to it. And if you continue here, he says, I believe that under the Police Act, you can be held liable and charged with impersonating a constable, which would also mean a custodial sentence. What are you? Are you a constable or are you an officer? And are you dealing with legislation? And if you put that to them, that will get them to back off immediately. Now, we discussed this the other day at a talk, and funny enough, the next day we went to Westminster Magistrates Court. There was a carry-on in the court that we were getting in, but 6 of us got in, weren't wearing masks, we just went in anyway, so it was fine, but everyone stopped and we wouldn't comply with anything. Now, what happened is while we're waiting for the court, 3 individuals that were at the top the day before turned up. We can see them from inside. We were up a couple of floors, so we're looking down on them. And the 3 of them went up and said, look, we're coming in. They didn't have a face mask, and there was an argument kicked off. But rather than obviously things escalating, they said, right, we need help. So what happened is the court staff immediately phoned the police. Within literally about a minute, we had 4 police cars there. Well, sorry, 3 police cars and a van. He said the van, it was big enough to take them all away. And then all of a sudden, all the officers came running out. So there would be 8, 9, 10 officers. They surrounded him. I thought, this is good. So one of the guys in the group of 3 filmed it and seemingly put it out on social media. And then listening to the talk the day before, then we're surrounded by police. And then Tannery says, hold on a minute, before you start here, look, I need to see, says, your warrant card. Show me your warrant card. Do you have it on you? And to be fair, the police were very aggressive. And then when that was the case, they said, well, it's okay. He said, why do you need it? He said, well, I need to see it, which you're entitled to do. So the police constable, or the police officer he took out his card. So when he took out his card to show it, he said, he tried to pull it away quickly. He said, no, hold on, I want to see that. So he had to show him and get a good look. He then says, he says, I can see you're a constable. And then he says, that's fine. He says, well, you can't be dealing with this in legislation if you're a constable. And immediately the attitude changed. He says, from one extreme to the other. And then instead of being very aggressive, they then quietened down, and the officers who were there then started speaking to them as humans. They treated them civilly. They were okay. They had a chat, a little laugh, and then all the police officers got into their cars and vans and drove away and left them. Now, that was interesting because they did that, but using the same logic, they said, well, look, the case has started. We can't do anything. We'll go around the corner. So they decided to go into the train station to get something to eat. Now, they'd actually arrived by train anyway, so we'll go back. There's a cafe there. So they went back in, but when they were standing there speaking, the three of them were together, no face mask. A police officer came up to see him in the station. He says, why have you not got a face mask? What are you doing? So they straight away, because it had worked previously, one of the guys turned and said, look, before we proceed, can I see your warrant card, please? So duly enough, the guy took out his warrant card, and as soon as he took out his warrant card, his attitude changed. They then had an informal chat. He says, so there was a few niceties exchanged, and the police officer turned and he said, well, thank you, and he walked away and left him. Standing there, no face mask, nothing, no problem at all. And yet, they were all aggressive beforehand. But as soon as you establish that they were a constable, they cannot act as an officer, and they cannot enforce legislation. And these guys got away with it. And when we come out of court, they couldn't believe that. They come up and says, I can't believe what just happened. And they were actually putting on to social media and telling everyone. But it does work. But the thing is, you need to hold these people accountable, and unfortunately, you deal with it. And you need to know how to deal with these issues. He says, so if the people, they understand the position they're in, the control they have, the authority they have, he says, you can change things for the better. But unfortunately, the system is rigged, so it just takes people standing together and finding out more and more about it.
So it sounds like there is some knowledge of these things at some level with police officers, not all of them, but they do realise that when somebody evokes all this stuff, it changes the game.
Yeah.
So incredible information there that you've shared, John. Thanks so much for all of that. Great work you're doing up there. Are you working more or less single-handedly, or do you have a team around you?
If only. Well, when the Common Law Court, I set up and convened the first Common Law Court, but basically, because I'd set this up because of what happened myself, I'd thought to myself, you cannot have people going into court and obviously being treated like this. So we have to have something that protects the people. So I spoke to a number of people before we even attempted the court. And again, not one individual can be a common law court, because the common law court is the people. Without the people, you don't have one. And the common law court and the authority comes from your jury of 12, your peers. So therefore, the common law court is the people. But what we've done is develop the system and work with it. Now, when we set up, we spoke to a number of people, this is from different backgrounds, and put this together to make sure that it was done correctly. We then run with it there. I set up the website because I convened the court. And what we've done is the website had to be created because when we convene a common law court, there has to be a public record. The easiest way to do it is to put it up on a website. So we created that, and from there it's developed. But the things that have happened with the common law court is developed because of the request from the people. So the people put forward things and the court develops as it goes. Now, with that, it's not a corporation, it's not a company, although many people have tried to say, look, we'll take over, we'll help, we'll do this, we'll make money. I said, no, it's nothing about that. It's nothing to do with money. It's to protect the people. Now, you can sign up and fill out everything on the site to protect yourself. It doesn't cost a penny. It's making a personal declaration, and you have everything you need to protect yourself and your families. So there's no money involved. There are things in people that says it was a mother who said, I've recorded my birth and I've taken the legal ownership of my child's legal fiction to protect my child. And I says, yes, okay. And they recorded the child's birth as well. And the mother says, right, okay, can I get my certificate now? He says, well, what certificate? He says, well, I need my certificate, my birth certificate for the child. I said, well, we don't do that. You have a reference number. That is a reference number and the proof of the child's birth. He said, no, I want a certificate. Can I not get a certificate? So we had to come back and speak to people and decide, look, we would do it. And we says, it'll be a good idea. So we actually had to borrow some money as well. We said no money to get something to make up certificates. So we actually do sell things like that. But again, it's done for very low profit. It's just to cover overheads and that. It's not compulsory. But with that, what's allowed us to do is obviously develop what we have. And unfortunately, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. So what we've done is taken on people initially to help volunteers and that. So we've actually got a team now that come in and work and help as volunteers. We're getting people volunteer from different countries all over. So providing we can train them up, they're all helping each in their other way, their own way, with some of the things that we're doing. We use people throughout the UK, predominantly we're in the UK. We've got a number of people in the UK we use to fight cases and to fight the state and to obviously defend the people. And then what we do is we chat to one another, we prepare paperwork, and we act together to assist them. So there are a number of people, key players, but again, some people specialise at certain things, some deal with other things. But there is a team obviously helping, it's expanding all the time, and we're taking them in from everywhere. I was down in London just now, but during the trip to London and back, I've got guys in Australia, we're speaking about that. They're about to convene their own court in Australia in a couple of weeks' time. I've got phone calls myself personally today, a guy in Canada, I'm away to phone to help out there. But we're speaking to people internationally as well, in addition to the UK, but we do have a team of people here, and as I said, it is expanding. So if anyone needs it, they've got the contact details, the email through the website. It's very difficult to say because bearing in mind, we're currently dealing with over 1,000 emails a day, which is horrendous. But obviously we're doing our best to get through them, and we do have people, but he says obviously they're not paid, they're coming in here just now and giving up a lot of free time. And it's not as if I can ask one of your listeners here to say, look, can you come in and answer these emails? They can't, because they need to understand how the system works and they need to know that they're giving out correct advice. The last thing we do is we tell people what to do and say, you will do X, Y, and Z. You can't do that. He says, because basically you may be giving a wrong information. You have to understand what we do. And not only that, when we obviously speak to people, we don't tell them you will do X, Y, or Z. All we do is discuss their situation, explain basically what their options are, and let the people decide themselves. If they require help, we'll help as much as we can, obviously with the resources we have. But we're obviously doing quite well. We do get a lot of help from people. So there is quite a large team help out with what we're doing.
On your Common Law Court website, then, you've got the option to record your birth with the Common Law Court. And
yes.
Also, there's a section there on CLC currency. So what's that all about, just briefly?
Right. Well, what we've done just now is people have problems dealing with the statutory system anyway. In relation to banking, the banking's a huge no-no. First of all, the currency is not real. It's not backed with anything. Now, what happens is we've had to use the system because people had wanted to purchase documents. So basically what we did is we set up an account online for processing payments. Now, we can't actually, the only thing we could get was PayPal because we're not a company or anything. So we got PayPal to process payments. There wasn't an issue. And we've been going about 3 years, everything had been fine. And then for some reason, a couple of months ago, because things have been getting busier, PayPal contacted and said, look, we have information just now. We need you to upgrade the information you have and give us more information. Because obviously, so you seem to be getting busier, Matt. We need to know more about your business. And I said, well, we're not a business. They said, well, we need your company details. I said, well, we're not a company. They said, well, what are you? He said, well, we're a non-profit organisation. And they said, right, okay, but you're selling stuff. And I said, the items we're selling, obviously, is documentation that's requested by the people, but we're here for education. And then they said, well, what's the documentation you're selling? I said, well, we can't really turn around and tell them because they obviously know that we're trying to take on a state. So we just says, well, the information is based on their personal request and it's subject to obviously what they're needing, but it's based on the educational materials we have. They said, no, it's too vague. We need your company details. We need that. We're not happy processing payments. And we argued for about 2 or 3 weeks and they decided that they were going to withdraw facilities to process payments. So that meant that we're now finished. We also get donations as well through there. So they shut it down. Now, we couldn't actually get anyone else to do this because they all want registered companies. We're not a registered company. We're not in this system. So we said, right, we'll have a look at it now. in the past, we've had two people previously have came to us and stated that they will help with what we're doing, but they want to obviously monetize it, and they want to look at things like the money system, and set up with common law, and what they were going to use use things like cryptocurrency. Now, I don't know. It says it may be good. It's just to have a new currency. I know nothing about cryptocurrency, and I just wouldn't get involved with it. And some of the people I've got don't know enough about it, and I wouldn't do it. It says, we're not doing that. We don't know enough about it. Leave it. So we've actually backed off and done nothing. Because of the problem we had recently with the payment, we said, right, we need somebody to process payments. Now, coincidentally, I was introduced to Sunry probably about 3 months ago because of some of the work they are doing, and they're setting up a reward system. Effectively, these were the guys that created the Tesco club card system. It was quite clever. Everyone knows how a club card works, but they were obviously wanting to set up an improved system. So they'd come up with an idea, but it was based on reward and sort of discounts for people and for businesses and small business owners to stand together. So I go back to them after a couple of months. They said, look, this is what's happened to me. Can you process payments on my site? And they said, well, yes, we can. We can do it that way. I said, right, okay, well, I'd like you to do that. I said, but and additionally with what you're doing just now, it's not really applicable to what we do. He said, but can you not just take this and develop it and create a new currency? They said, well, yes, we can. The facility exists to do that. He said, but nobody's doing that. We're using it, obviously, to assist businesses. And I said, but if I wanted to do this just now, he said, well, not me. He said, I don't have money. But if people wanted to do this and use something here, can we use this and set up something and have a monetary system? And he says, yes. So I went away and spoke to quite a few people who we deal with to sound them out with the idea. And says, what do you think about this? But we all came up with a consensus that if you're doing something like this, it should be done. You can use a new currency, but to do so, it has to be real, which means it has to be backed. So it's backed. It can be backed in gold, silver, platinum, anything you want. It has to be value. There has to be value there. So equivalent, if you were to take something like £100 and say, here, there's £100, I'm putting it into an account. The £100 you're giving is fiat currency, papers and worthless. But what we'll do is to create the currency we've got. If you pay in £100 to account, we'll credit the account, but what we'll do is we'll buy, say, for example, gold. We'll buy gold, £100 of gold. So therefore, what you've done, effectively, you've purchased gold. So we will hold the gold there so it's guaranteed. And then if you require money out, we'll resell the gold and release the money. So therefore, you can get your money out. Now, these guys have the facility to change immediately by using one card to change the currency in any currency you want. So if you were purchasing something and you needed euros, you can do that. If you wanted to pay in dollars, you do that. If you want to pay in pounds sterling, you can do it. It says if you want to pay and use a new currency, say a CLC currency, if you want to do that, it would have a value as well. But basically, you can do that, and the card allows them to pay in any currency they want. If you happen to go to a country, you can go to the country and use the cards as well. So it's actually quite a good way of doing it. So we looked at that just now. But what we needed to do, because of the first step, we needed to set up the facility so people can obtain an account. And then from there, we'll develop it. But the main thing we needed to do was to get payments processed on the site. So the company set up, they're processing payments. We're not connected to them. It's like PayPal. It's just another company. They're processing payments, and that's it. But what they've done is allowed us to create something called CLC currency. So we're creating that. Now, all that's happening is people can pay for the products on site. Now, the good thing about that is we're not connected to the state. We're not connected to PayPal, the banks, the banking system. We've nothing to do with them. So basically, we have our own account, and that means it can never be closed either, because the banks close accounts. The banks dictate how much money you can put into your account. So if you go and put in a large sum, the first thing they say to you is, well, where did you get it from? What's it got to do with them? If it's your money and it's your account, you put it in, it's yours. But you have to answer questions. If you want to take out a couple of £1,000 or something, you can't get it out unless you answer their questions. So not only is your money in there, it's your money, you can't take it out. If they're not happy, they'll freeze your account. If they're not happy with you, they'll charge you. If the council are not happy, they'll take a payment off you. They can freeze your account. They can take money off for, say, council tax payments. Your employers can be ordered, obviously, to deduct money as well. So all this affects the banking system. But you've no say in this at all. He said, yeah, it's your money. I said, no, the people need an account, but they need an account which is controlled by them. They can put in their own money. They can take out their own money. They will not be charged for it. The account will not be frozen. It will not be. Obviously, it says they will not get penalties or fines. They'll know exactly what they're doing. And again, they operate themselves. So they will use a proper bank account. And not only that, it will be backed by gold, silver, or platinum or something. So it's backed and it's real. So if, for example, the dollar or the pound crashed because of what's going on in their system, it doesn't affect us because we have it backed with gold, silver, or platinum or something. So it is backed and it's worth money, so the people will be protected. Also, when you put money into the banking system, had you sold a house and wanted to retire and you want to rent somewhere, you can have £250,000 if you want, and you can put that in a bank account. As soon as the money goes over the counter, the law states that it's the bank's money, right? And then if you try to take out money or the bank collapses, if you've put in like 250, 260,000, I don't know what the current figure is. I think it's about 70 or 80,000. That is protected. So if you had, say, £270,000, you would get, say, 70,000 approximately protected, which means on the money you have in the account, you'll get £70,000 back. That means you've lost 200,000 because they're incompetent and their system crashed. So you're losing money. If you took that and you put it into the CLC currency with your own account, it goes in, it's not restricted and it's backed. It's not a problem. You'll not lose money. So basically you put in money there, the value is the same. And when you take it out, if things are changing in the UK and everything's crashing, you say, right, I want my money out. You take the money out, but you take all your money out. You don't lose, 75% of it. You get all your money back. So therefore, this system's protected. And it means as well that the state don't have access to your accounts. They're speaking about going cashless. It says which predominantly people will probably be using, although you can have cash, but it's probably better digital. But if you were to do that, the state have control over the digital accounts and they will dictate whether or not you get money. If they say everyone has to have a COVID injection, if you refuse to do that, they can close your account. If you get benefits, they may say, well, you're not getting benefits now because you've not got a COVID injection. So if they stop the benefits and there's cashless society, you've no money then. What happens then to feed your family? But with this system here, they can't do that because basically it's got nothing to do with them. They can't close the account. If you have money in the account, it's yours. You can take it out when you need it. So as I said just now, we needed to process payments initially, but with these people, we've set this option up. So the option on the website for CLC Currency is to allow them to open up an account. That's the only way we deal with it. So if they open an account, they get obviously an email with the account number and they get their code as well. Now, having done that, what they then have to do is top up the card. So if they top up their card or the account, all they do is to put money into the account, and then when they have the card, they can just use it to purchase things on the site. So that's the way it works. It's like a top-up phone. If you have a phone card, this is you go to the shop and top up your card. Well, it's exactly the same with this. This one, you'll actually have an account. It's just so you're basically putting money into the account, and when you choose to do so, you can then make the payments and do it that way. However, because we're developing this further, in a matter of weeks coming, the concept will be able to run and operate as a proper bank account, meaning that you can pay your bills through this concept as well. So you will have a fully functioning bank account, and it's separate from the state, and it'll be backed by obviously something real. So that's where we're going with that one. But obviously there's quite a lot to go through, but we are looking at other options just now, which obviously include things like education and health and things like that. I would actually like to point out just now, because we're looking at all these things, we're being approached by people. It's people that are raising these issues. Something simple like education we have in this country just now is disgusting what the state are doing. everyone's pre-programmed from things like nursery onwards, but we have loads and loads of people complaining about the educational system. So we're looking at that. Now, we're happy to announce that we were actually beaten to the mark. This is what had happened. We're looking at educational facilities, and going to set them up with the people to teach children at any age. We were looking at that, and what happened is we were approached a couple of weeks ago by someone who runs and operates a nursery, preschool. So they've actually been operating for 22 years and successfully, and it's quite a large place. It's also, they've got over 40 staff as well, so it's quite a large facility. They've been running successfully for 22 years, but they've been contacted recently by the authorities, the statutory authorities, and they've been informed that unless they have their staff all vaccinated, they're going to close the nursery. So the individual is saying, no, I'm not having that under no circumstances. She's prepared to take them on, but she looked at the explanation and asked about registering her company under common law. So we've actually had a chat, and she's now done that just over a week ago. So she has now a nursery operating under common law and protected by common law, and she's teaching children at this preschool nursery. Now we've got that, so we've actually tapped out, so we have an educational facility. We're dealing with healthcare issues as well, various other things, and money. This is what's being looked at. So the more and more people find out about this, and more facilities will open up, and you can run and operate under common law. We have obviously people operating. We had something like a takeaway in the north of England. This is a takeaway open. It was quite good, but they operated and established a company under common law. Having done that, they then took on the authorities, the council, the police, everyone that came in to their takeaway shop for refusing to wear a mask. And they've been intimidated, threatened, bullied, and everything. They're still operating. He says, and they still operate, they don't wear masks, they refuse to take fines. And what the state have decided to do is, because they can't do anything, they're actually sending out the fines through the post. It's the only way to get them. So they're actually doing that, but these shop owners are actually conducting their business and they're not complying with the state, and they haven't done so. And they've had huge amount of following on social media as well because of what they're doing. But they're standing under common law, so it does work. And as I said, more and more people do this, the easier it will be to change and protect the people.
Well, awesome information, highly practical, highly topical for these times. So, John, thanks for coming on today, brother. So for further information, it's commonlawcourt.com if people want to reach out to you, right?
Okay. And again, thank you for having that. And again, please bear in mind, obviously, we are dealing with obviously lots of people just now. We have a team helping out just now, but obviously we're doing our best to move on. We're going to put out information. We will continue to do that as well about what we're doing. But there are new develops and literally happening on a week-to-week basis. So if they keep an eye on the site, and they will see how we're developing the concept.
Sure. And your YouTube channel is what?
It's CLC News.
CLC News.
It's CLC, then a space, and then News. If you click on there, you'll see obviously our logo. Click onto the logo, and if you go on there, we put up videos regularly. But when they click onto that, if they please subscribe to the channel, it means each time we post a video, they'll get notification of it as well.
Great. Thanks for coming on today.
This is just for that.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations.